So what is this distillation process that has caused DeepSeek so many problems? Well, it has nothing to do with distilling alcohol like to make whiskey or something. Think of it like an advanced AI teacher being used to train a smaller student AI. So let me give you an example, a hypothetical one using ChatGPT and DeepSeek as an example. So a trained teacher LLM like ChatGPT is fed a bunch of training input prompts, and then ChatGPT, of course, will naturally output responses to these prompts. Okay, so the student LLM then is trained, like this would be DeepSeek, for instance. It would be trained using the inputs and the outputs. And this is instead of something like how ChatGPT is typically trained, is using big data sets, like essentially the whole internet, or huge amounts of books and chats and things like that. Instead of using that, it's just using the inputs and the outputs from something like ChatGPT to train the DeepSeek model. And this is what allows a student LLM to have similar capabilities and possibly even better capabilities, but using way less computing power in terms of training and then also running the model. So what is wrong with this distillation process, and why does it cause problems for DeepSeek? So companies like OpenAI, of course, don't want their competitors to train rival LLMs using their product. And so therefore it's against the terms of service to use ChatGPT this way. And this is a typical thing with software companies or companies with products. They put limitations on the way that you can use their product, especially with things like software. They say, hey, you have a limited license to use this, and if you use it in any sort of way, it's a violation of terms and service. And so what this creates then, it creates an unauthorized use that could be copyright infringement and could cause other intellectual property issues. It could also just generally be considered unethical because a competitor company is using a better trained AI to train their competitor AI. And so they're kind of taking advantage of all the work that the big company has already done, all the money they've put into it, and it can be kind of seen as being unfair. And this could be directly why DeepSeek was able to make their as good, if not better, model on a budget of only $5.5 million and in a span of only 2 months, which in a lot of ways people say it's unfair competition to use ChatGPT that way, especially when it's against the terms and service of ChatGPT. So what could OpenAI and Microsoft do about this? Well, the first thing is they can terminate ChatGPT accounts that are found to be training LLMs or using ChatGPT in any way that is against terms of service. And my understanding is they've already done this. They've shut down a bunch of accounts that are allegedly associated with DeepSeek. And this is sort of the first course of action that they're going to be doing to stop this from happening in the future. But the damage has already been done in a lot of ways. So DeepSeek is already out there. It's already proliferating. So just terminating accounts now really isn't going to be very helpful, and it's going to be kind of whack-a-mole in a lot of ways. So another thing that they can do is they can try to sue for damages caused by improper use and IP infringement. What this would look like is saying, hey, we've been harmed by this. They violated our terms of service, which makes it IP misappropriation or IP infringement, and we deserve damages. They've taken some of the market share. We've lost face as a result. And so there have been economic or monetary damages, and we want to get compensated for that. Similarly, they could ask a court for an injunction to shut down or block DeepSeek. So think of like TikTok. So TikTok was potentially being shut down in the United States. OpenAI or Microsoft could try to have that done. They could potentially also try to have it shut down at the source. So shut down the servers in China, have all the information about DeepSeek destroyed. Another recourse would be to lobby for governments to shut down or fine DeepSeek. Again, a good analogy is what happened with TikTok. TikTok was seen as having data privacy and security issues, and so the government was going to shut it down. It's hard to know whether that's still going to happen, but something like that could certainly happen with DeepSeek as well. So what are some challenges if OpenAI and Microsoft are going to try to do this? Well, the main one is that DeepSeek is a Chinese company. They have limited, if no, presence in the United States. And so it's going to be a lot easier to block DeepSeek in the US, activity coming into the US, but it's going to be really hard to block activity in China. It's important to understand how DeepSeek works to understand why this is going to make things so difficult. So with any LM, just like DeepSeek, you put in prompts or you can put in documents or images, things like that. That data then is sent to a server in China at DeepSeek, and the big LLM that's running on these massive servers processes that information that you sent them, and then it'll spit out a response to your question or your documents or whatever sort of query you have. That's going to be the issue here, is because all the activity is going on in China, right? Aside from the sending and receiving of information to and from China, all the big processing is going on in China, okay? So you can probably imagine it's going to be difficult to get a Chinese court to agree to shut down DeepSeek. They're probably going to be biased against US companies like OpenAI and Microsoft. Another option is getting damages. So if they were to get damages in the United States, this would have to be validated and enforced by a Chinese court, which is also going to be really difficult. They could get an award for damage in the US, but again, unless there's a US company or other entity that's associated with DeepSeek where they could get those damages from, it's going to be very unlikely they're going to be able to recover anything unless they can get a Chinese court to actually validate that judgment. They could sue for damages or sue for an injunction in China, but again, the Chinese legal system may not be very friendly to that, and there's no guarantee that they would get much traction with those things. Otherwise, it's going to be just a jurisdiction by jurisdiction thing, so they can shut it down in the United States through court actions in the United States, maybe in Europe through court actions in Europe, but really they're going to have to do it in each of these countries individually if they're not able to shut down or get damages from DeepSeek directly in China. So what about government and political actions? Right now, Italy is the first country to actually block DeepSeek, and they did that because of privacy and security concerns. And this could be a rationale to block DeepSeek in the US or potentially other countries that are doing similar investigations. So it's the US, South Korea, Taiwan, France, Ireland, Australia, and likely others are doing these investigations. This could be a way to put economic and political pressure on China, and it could be done under the auspices of the privacy and security concerns. Even if those things don't exist, it could be a way to create a win for people with anti-China politics. Especially the United States these days is fairly anti-China, and so in a lot of ways, regardless of whether there's truly privacy and security policies, politicians would want to do it just so they can show that they're being hard on China, they're fighting back against Chinese aggression, and they're being competitive against these Chinese companies who are misappropriating intellectual property of US companies. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that you're going to see some governments doing that for legitimate or potentially just political reasons. So what should you do? One of the things is, if you want to keep on using DeepSeek, you can download the app onto your phone now. And this is something that people did with TikTok, anticipating that TikTok was going to be shut down. So you may be able to download it now, but keep in mind that you're not going to be able to get updates, and this could cause the app to be outdated, and it could lose functionality, and it could have severe security vulnerability. So it's only sort of a temporary thing to do. Also, keep in mind, if you're using the web browser version of DeepSeek, that could be completely blocked. It's a lot easier to block websites, things coming in from certain IP addresses or from certain locations. It's easier to block those sort of things. So for instance, keep in mind that all of your chats and other stuff that you've put into or received from DeepSeek, that could be completely lost. So I don't know about you, but I do a lot of work with ChatGPT and Claude and a bunch of other LLMs, and I do a lot of personal research, and I do work for this YouTube channel. I do a lot of personal things like asking it questions about life goals and all this kind of stuff. And it would be a tragedy if all that information that I've put in and shared and all the information I've gotten from ChatGPT were to be lost. That would be terrible. So if you're investing a lot of time and effort in these conversations with DeepSeek, keep in mind that there may come a time where the website is going to be blocked and you may not have access to all that data. You may be able to get around that by maybe using a VPN or going to a location where it's not blocked, but you may have a hard time getting access to that data, and it could potentially be completely lost if DeepSeek gets shut down. So what should you do to keep your data safe? Now, this really applies to using any LLM, not just DeepSeek. And I don't want to get into the whole thing of, is DeepSeek unsafe? Is OpenAI unsafe, using ChatGPT unsafe, and all these other LLMs? This really applies to all LLMs. The first thing is to understand how the technology works. And I already kind of talked about how you're effectively sending the queries and all this data to a remote server, whether that's in China for DeepSeek or whether that's in the United States for OpenAI and ChatGPT. This is going to be happening with pretty much all of these LLMs. So don't input any sensitive data into these LLMs where you're sending it to a remote server. You don't know what's being done with that. You don't know how it's being stored, who has access to it, whether that could be leaked, whether it could be hacked, and you could have all that stuff publicly exposed. So here's sort of what I tell my clients when it comes to any sort of data privacy and security. Assume that anything you put down in an email or a text or that you send over the internet could potentially be viewed by other people. So don't put anything in there that you wouldn't want seen by your parents, by your company, by your spouse, by companies, and or by the government. So you need to be really careful about the things that you put into LLMs because you have no idea how that's going to be used. Another option, though, is to run an LLM locally on your phone or on your computer. And DeepSeek is a great example of an open source model where you can actually download a version of the DeepSeek LLM and run it locally. The only issue with that, though, is that these LLM models aren't going to be as powerful because to running the full DeepSeek model, it requires these massive servers and a lot of computing power and a lot of energy and a lot of cooling, things like that. So your small phone, which is pretty powerful, or your laptop, which is also pretty powerful, is not going to be able to run the full version. It'll run sort of a watered down version of something like DeepSeek or another LLM that you download. So it's not going to be as powerful. You may get some functionalities, but using a local model that is going to be more private because the data is just sent to the LLM locally, it's not sent to a remote server. That's going to be a lot more secure, obviously, since it's only on your personal device, but it's not going to be more powerful. But what it really comes down to is you have to be using AI so that you don't get left behind. The pace of change is exponentially increasing. It used to be that big software changes didn't happen, every few years, every few months, but now we're looking at a time where changes are going to be happening weekly, if not daily. We're already seeing that with new models coming out after DeepSeek. So you have to be using AI to understand how it works so that you can build up your immune system, as I call it, related to using technology. Just as people need to sort of build up an immune system to using the internet and understand how to work in the internet safely, you need to build up an immune system through understanding of using AI so you don't get taken advantage of and don't get scammed with AI and have your data stolen or create other issues for yourself.